Donald Watkins guilty on all counts in his fraud trial.
What's up, YouTube and Podcast Nation? Welcome to the From Setbacks to Success YouTube channel. Want to let you know that I have a very special guest today for today's episode. It is Mr. Donald Watkins Jr. Donald, good morning and good afternoon. How are you doing today, my brother?
Good morning, Mr. Benton. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, my brother, doing excellent. So this one, I would have to say, and I want to start by saying this to the audience, this I would think is one of my most important interviews in a lot of different ways. And no slight or diss to any of the other guests that I've had, but this one takes on a whole lot of another level in as far as the nature of this discussion and the nature of and Donald's story and his related case. I am just really honored to have the opportunity to sit down today with you, Donald, to discuss it. And I think that there's going to be some valuable things that come out of this conversation for those who watch and listen to this podcast all the way to the end. But we're going to get into it. And I'm going to start by really, at this point, just flashing kind of a brief summary of the case.
Birmingham area attorney Donald Watkins Sr. is heading to prison, but not for quite as long as prosecutors wanted.
You and your father, Donald Watkins Sr., it was a highly documented, high-profile case there in the state of Alabama. And I want to just kind of start it off by letting you talk about the case as we roll some of the at this point, some of the credits or some of the information related to the case. But in your own words, I want you to talk about just a brief synopsis of the case and go from there.
Yeah, sure, Quincy. And thank you for having me on the show. And I want to start off by saying how I appreciate you asking me to be on your show. I'm honored, and I do consider it a privilege. And I also want to say how proud I am of you as well. Me knowing what I know of everything that you've been through over the most recent years, and obviously you and I share some commonalities on that, and we know how challenging that stuff can be. And for you to be here now, looking good and looking like you're on top of your game and everything, man, and hosting this show and just pushing forward and doing the things you need to do to provide for yourself and your family, I just think it's remarkable. So I just want to give you your kudos and your props for that to start.
Thank you, brother.
But to answer your question, so basically our case was by the government's definition, it was a fraud case, a combination wire fraud and bank fraud case, where basically the government said that my father and they conflated both of us into the case, and they basically said that we had a business, and in the course of that business, we took on investors, and that we made representations to those investors of how their investment dollars were going to be spent. And then after the dollars were deposited into our account, we spent the dollars in a manner different from how we said they were going to be spent. And that was the essence of our case. So if my dad, for example, may send an investor an email saying, "Hey, we're trying to expand into this particular market or this particular country, and in order to do so, we're trying to raise this amount of money. And would you be interested in contributing some capital to this venture?" And then when the capital comes in, my dad basically spent the money how he saw fit. And apparently how he saw fit to spend the money didn't jive with the government's definition of a business expense, if you will. And so they basically said that we were using investor money or investor proceeds in a manner or in a way that we should not have been doing so. So that was the crux of our case. And in my eyes and in my opinion, our case boiled down to business transactions in a private business where the investors and all of the people who had a vested interest were fully aware of everything that my dad was doing and how he was doing it. Everything was documented in an agreement, a business agreement that was not only signed by the investors, but also a lot of these investors were what my dad likes to call accredited investors, meaning they had financial people, accountants, lawyers etc., reviewed the agreements before they signed them. And so once you sign a business agreement, there's an understanding that everybody understands what that agreement means and the different terms of that agreement. And there was language in all of the agreements that, hey, some of these funds may be spent a certain way. There was terminology in the agreement that said your agreement is subject to risk, just like with most investor agreements. There was that language in there. And there were other things in the agreements. And I'm telling you this now, not because I was extremely familiar with the agreements, because I wasn't. My dad wrote these agreements and he had the relationships with the investors. I actually learned more about the agreements as I went through trial. So contrary to popular belief and contrary to what the government would have you believe, I was highly unaware of my dad's relationships and with his investors and the inner workings of his business. I did some work for him primarily on an outside administrative level, where basically I would just kind of pay bills, just regular bills for the office. And so for me, I didn't really have an interest in knowing or understanding where the money came from to pay those bills. I just knew that, I would get a call saying, hey, such and such is going to be wiring some money to me. And when the money comes in, I need you to pay this, and this. And so that was the extent of my knowledge of the business dealings for this particular business. Outside of that, Quincy, I didn't have any ownership interest in the business. I didn't have a vested interest in the business. I never traveled on behalf of the business. I never met any of the investors. I never solicited any investments. I didn't do any of that. And all of the investors testified to that on the witness stand at our trial. So yeah. And so I think because of my minimal involvement in my dad's business dealings with this particular business, I think that is the reason that out of the 10 counts that we were charged with and indicted on, while the jury convicted my dad on all 10 counts, they acquitted me of 8 of the 10 counts. And they convicted me on 1 wire fraud charge and 1 conspiracy to commit wire fraud. So I think that even the jury realized the minimal involvement and the minimal nature of my involvement in the business dealings and in this particular matter. And I think they expressed their understanding of that with the acquittals in my case.
Gotcha. I appreciate you clarifying that. I know that is for, and just for the audience, just full disclosure, Donald and I are actually classmates. We attended the same historically Black college and university in Atlanta, Georgia, Morehouse College. Go Maroon Tigers. So with that, there were, conversations. This was, and there's just a lot tied to, being college graduates, being graduates of institutions such as Morehouse College, all African-American male, for the predominantly African-American male institution, one private college, one of a kind, essentially. So for, just clarity that this was something that did hit, and it was a conversation, again, just none of us and would think that we would find ourselves, as college graduates, and this is just a whole nother separate conversation that I'd like to entertain a little bit as well about, being a college graduate and finding yourself, facing state, federal charges and, actually being convicted of those charges and having to do some type of time, because I think that there are things like that going on that we need to discuss that are really not being discussed publicly to my knowledge. But going back to your situation, yeah, it did hit there, speaking to your character. I guess there was just not a lot of clarity, about what took place. And not that we wanted to, or at least on my end, wanted to get into your business or, know or make any type of judgment calls. Again, I thank you for presenting your side of the story, because it has been presented one way. And I don't think that your side has been well documented as much as it should be. So that we'll start there. And again, I appreciate you for sharing that. But going a little deeper into it, one of the things that made it high profile had a lot to do with your family. Their long legacy, of Watkins in out the state of Alabama, and I want you to speak to that on a certain level. And then also, related to that, there were some high profile names attached to this case as well as some extremely high dollar amounts for most people.
Well, Ian, the first-round draft pick and all-pro linebacker invested $1 million in Watkins' business, and today Takeo Spikes joined an all-star cast of witnesses called to testify to try to prove the guilt of a legendary lawyer.
Maybe not in the business community, but can we dig into that? First of all, let's just jump into some of your background and what was life like growing up for you? Where did you grow up? And kind of take us to how you got to working with your dad.
Sounds good. So born and bred in Alabama for the most part. Born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, University of Alabama, Roll Tide, all that stuff. My father was actually in his second year of law school at the University of Alabama Law School when I was born. So I was born in 72. He was in second year of law school there. He and my mom lived there on campus during that whole time. And then after my father graduated from law school and passed the bar, he moved to Montgomery to practice law. And so our family, therefore, moved to Montgomery, where my parents had 3 other sons. So I'm the oldest of 4 boys. And so I grew up in Montgomery, attended the Montgomery public school system my entire life, elementary school, Davis Elementary School, Bellingrath Junior High School, and Sidney Lanier High School in Montgomery. And then after high school, Quincy, I decided I had my fill of Montgomery for a while, and I wanted to do something different. And so I decided I wanted to go to college outside of Montgomery. I had applied to the University of Alabama for undergraduate school, and I was pretty much set to go there. I thought that's where I wanted to go because most of my friends were going to school there. And I bumped into a friend of mine that I grew up with who was enrolled in Morehouse at the time. And his name is Joe Reed. He's a lawyer in Montgomery. And he's, I think, class of 91 or class of 92 Morehouse. And I was over at his house one night. We were just talking about different things, and my college choice had come up. And he said, so where'd you apply? Where you think about going and all this stuff? And I said, well, I was thinking about University of Alabama. He said, man, listen to me. He said, you would be making a life mistake if you went to the University of Alabama. He said, you need to be at Morehouse College. I said, what's, I didn't really know a whole lot about Morehouse College. I knew that that's where he was enrolled. I said, well, what's up with Morehouse? What's going on at Morehouse? Why Morehouse? And so he started to regale me with all of these stories, of all this cool stuff that was happening at Morehouse when he was there, the step shows and the different colleges full of women that surrounded Morehouse, the Spelman, Clark, Morris Brown, and just the Martin Luther King factor, the Morehouse mystique, all these different things, and how people viewed you and how they treated you just because you were a Morehouse student. And so by the time we finished having that talk that night, after a couple of hours, I pretty much decided that Morehouse was going to be the school for me. I was going to submit my application and get my butt over there to Atlanta, toot sweet. He told me how difficult it was to get into Morehouse. It was a very in high demand school. There was a good chance that I could apply and not get accepted because they had plenty of guys on the waiting list and all this kind of stuff. So fingers crossed, but I did submit my application. I did get early admission to Morehouse and entered Morehouse in the fall of 1990.
Okay.
Probably one of the best decisions I could have made. So that was me in a nutshell growing up in Montgomery. But as far as my family history and family name, basically, I didn't know this at the time when I was younger, but the reason people viewed me and I think treated me slightly differently from the other students in elementary school, junior high, high school, was because my grandfather was the president of Alabama State University for about 20 years. He was there from 1962 to 1981. And apparently that was a big deal that I didn't really know about because I was young, right? Mm-hmm. But apparently that's a big deal in the community, in Montgomery, and really statewide. Because so many people that I knew, so many people that you probably know, had roots at Alabama State, either attended Alabama State, their parents went to Alabama State, brother, sister, somebody. And so I grew up kind of having these great grandparents that I didn't quite know why they were so great. And then, of course, as I get older and further down the road, I realized that, hey, that was a pretty big deal for them to preside over an entire university. And not only that, but have your name on the building, on the college's campus. My grandfather's name appears on the library and business administration building on the campus to this day. It's called the Levi Watkins Learning Center, named after my grandfather, Levi Watkins Sr. So I do remember when I was younger, going over to the campus and hanging out at the president's mansion when I was younger with my brothers, running around the president's mansion, and they had horses at the time that grazed in the back of the president's mansion, and we would feed the horses and things like that. And and again, I'm enjoying all this stuff and not really giving a whole lot of thought to how sort of powerful this is in that small city and in this state. And so our family legacy, in my eyes, started there, and then my father, when he started practicing law in Montgomery, he became a very well-known, very popular civil rights attorney in Montgomery, and he was very outspoken. He would always challenge the establishment. He would always challenge the white officials in city government, state legislature, whoever. He didn't care. He didn't back down from anybody. When he finally ran for elected office for the first time, he ran for city council in Montgomery back in the 70s, and he won his first election. And at the time, the mayor of the city was a man by the name of Emory Falmer. And Emory Falmer was pretty much known as to put it nicely, he was very conservative. If I didn't want to put it so nicely, or somebody else might even call him a diehard racist from the George Wallace generation. Right. But anyway, he was pretty fire and brimstone conservative, and so my dad was one of the few blacks on the city council, but he was probably the one who challenged Emory Falmer the most on that council. I mean, they would have shouting matches and go back and forth, and it was just really my dad standing up for his district, for his community, and mainly for black folks across the city. And so during that 4 years, again, I was so young at the time. I was born in 72. I think he was on the council in 79. So I was so young at that time, I didn't really fully understand. But my dad was making a name for himself as an outspoken, controversial lawyer, capable lawyer in Montgomery, and went on to be even more popular as time went by. But so those two guys, my grandfather and my dad, were the reasons that I think my family name and family reputation in Montgomery and in Alabama in general were so prevalent. And then people knew about some other members of my family. My dad's brother, his older brother, Uncle Levi Watkins Jr., who was a cardiac surgeon at Johns Hopkins, and some of the pioneering feats that he had back in 1980. He was the first person to implant the implantable defibrillator into a human body. Gotcha. He did that at Johns Hopkins. It's in Wikipedia and everything. Yeah. And so he made some great strides. And when he arrived at Hopkins and was like the dean of the medical school, or associate dean, they say he increased African American enrollment at Hopkins by 400% single-handedly.
Okay. Wow.
And so he did his part. He was, when he was up there in Baltimore, he was running in all the circles with the Coretta Scott Kings and the Rosa Parkses of the world, and the Andrew Young family, and those kinds of people. They all were all just good friends, and he knew all of them extremely well. And so because of these figures that I grew up knowing and being related to, I soon later on in life realized that by the time I got to Morehouse, I realized that, okay, hey, I think I come from some pretty decent pedigree. Right. I think I come from a pretty decent family, and we have a pretty strong name that family members in our family have worked hard to keep up and to keep strong. And so I need to do my part. And so that was the quest that I set out for by the time I got to Morehouse, was to try to figure out a way to continue making my family proud and continue holding high the family name.
Yes. Man, you really cover a lot of important historical things related to, it's just a lot in there, related to the Deep South, the political culture there, issues related to, segregation and just outright racism, the whole birth, in the sense we're similar in our age range. We were really products of the civil rights movement. My father involved in it in a very heavy level here in Oklahoma City. Desegregate again, integration of public schools, desegregation of public restaurants and lunch counters and things of that nature. So yeah, I get it, and really that's a history lesson that I think we continue to need to we need to continue to promote, so we understand how we as a society have gotten to the point that we are now. Because I think some of that is being lost. It was really ingrained in us to understand these things and how society was built. I'm not sure that everyone understands that right now, particularly with the younger generation. So I appreciate you covering that. So again, you mentioned something there, and I know this interview is about you, but again, your dad and yourself are kind of inextricably linked in a lot of ways. And I want to bring up, actually, because Donald did talk about his dad being a very, outspoken, civil rights advocate, attorney, educated, has, passed the bar. And I know there is a ed-op that he wrote after being, I believe, released from prison in 2022. And for the people watching right now and listening, I just want to take an opportunity to link that to this episode. The link will be in the description. We'll run a little bit of it during this part of this segment of the interview. But I just want, because I read it and it spoke to some of what you're speaking of, Donald, his outspokenness about the federal government, their practices. This guy, I haven't had the opportunity to meet him yet. I'm looking forward possibly to have an opportunity, but he's built a little different than I think a lot of people are nowadays. And he doesn't hold any punches. And there again, there's a lot of, he's well researched, well documented. He understands the historical context, the political nature of what's going on in Alabama and probably throughout the country and global level as well. And so, yeah, I think it was very special. And I wanted to share that with the audience as well. But moving forward, let's talk about some of the setbacks. And again, going back to you and how you are transitioning right now, what was...
Hey, I just realized you had a second part to your question, and it was about celebrity figures that came through our trial. Can I touch on that real quick?
Yeah, please do so.
Okay. So fast forward to our trial. So one of the things that made our trial so high profile, aside from our name and our family name, because Alabama is a small, it's probably a decent sized state, geographically, but socially it's a small state, right?
Yes.
So it's not difficult. If you're doing anything of note, anything noteworthy, it's not difficult for word to get around and for your name to get around. So my dad, even though he operated in circles in Montgomery and in Birmingham, ultimately my dad became basically well-known nationwide for the most part, throughout the state for sure, but nationwide even. And so, and also during his travels and during his pursuits in both law and in business, he's met a lot of people. I mean, he knows, he knows everybody. He's probably met everybody. There are probably people he's met that I don't even know that he's met or that he even knows. And that includes a lot of people that were mentioned or did participate in our trial, either as victims or as witnesses that were called to the stand, who were also noteworthy in their own right. The biggest name is probably Charles Barkley.
Yes.
There were a few other, I think, football players and a couple of other athletes, and then some other non-sports-related figures who were big names in our trial. Martin Luther King III testified in our trial. Condoleezza Rice testified in our trial. I cross-examined all these people because again, I represented myself in the trial.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I interacted directly with all of these people during the course of the trial. And I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm just saying it's just kind of weird and kind of amazing all at the same time when I look back at it. But as far as the folks in our trial, and I think it was sort of by design on the part of the federal government to sort of call these names to the stand, because it drew more attention to their case, and it drew more attention to their allegations against my father and ultimately against me. and I think it was their way of driving home their point of what they were trying to do to us by calling these big names to the stand. Because and the reason I say that, Quincy, is because some of these people, if you actually talk to them or if you get to know them like we did, folks like Barkley did not jump up and volunteer to come to our trial and try to tear us down. Okay. Barkley is not that kind of guy. And I've known Barkley now for a number of years. And he was compelled to testify. Basically, it's a situation where when a federal government official comes to you and flips a badge and says, hey, I'm with the FBI, or I'm with the federal prosecutor's office, and, we want you to testify in this case. And the thing is, you don't know what these people are saying to get you to testify. I mean, you know this from probably your situation.
Yes.
You don't know what tactics they use. You don't know what they say. You don't know what they threaten you with. I'm not saying they threaten Barkley or anybody else to testify, but you just don't know what tactics they use to get people to participate against other people. But I can tell you that Barkley didn't really want to have anything to do with our trial. I think he was disappointed with some of the allegations that he heard. And I think a lot of those allegations could have been cleared up, in my opinion, with the conversation between my dad and him directly, or me and him directly. But, once it gets into the hands of the federal government, that's not possible. So, but I could just tell from Barkley's demeanor on the witness stand that he was just there because he was asked to be there. He was compelled to be there. He was not there to try to sabotage or try to hurt us, or necessarily try to help the government, even though he was a government witness. I think he did want some answers himself.
Okay.
Because he did have some money invested with my father. So he did want to get some clarity and some answers. But I think to this day, but for federal prosecutors and probably other haters in his ear saying that he got ripped off by Donald Watkins, I think but for that, Barkley would understand that was not necessarily the case.
Yes.
And, and again, I'm certainly not going to sit here on this show and retry my case with you, but I'm just giving you my opinion just based on my direct one-on-one interactions with these people. I'm not going to go into the other folks because I honestly did not know them as well as I knew Barkley. But I can tell you this much, just to kind of wrap up this segment in a big bow. I saw Barkley earlier this year.
Yeah, that was my question. Yeah, have you had the conversation with Charles since being released, since after the trial? Yes. Yeah,
so we exchanged some messages via text during the pandemic, which is, when I got home, the pandemic was in full swing, so it prevented a lot of people from connecting in person for a long time. But we did exchange some messages when I got home, and exchanged a few messages over the next couple of years until I actually saw him recently this year at the Regions Golf Tournament here in Birmingham, the Regions Golf Classic here in Birmingham. And immediately upon seeing each other, I mean, I was standing there in the midst of several other people in the vicinity, and he walked up and he basically beelined straight to me, and he gave me a big hug. We embraced. And we just kind of stood there and talked in each other's ear for like a good 60 seconds, minute and a half. Just, how are you? How are you, my brother? How's everything going? I'm glad to see you. I'm glad that you look well. Blah blah blah. We need to get together. Next time I'm in town, I'm gonna call you. We'll meet up at one of his favorite. He has a couple of favorite restaurants in Birmingham he likes to hang out at. Right. And so he said, I'll call you, let you know when I'm in town. You roll through. Blah blah blah. And so, it was a very warm embrace and a very warm words exchanged on his part. And, we didn't talk about the trial. We didn't talk about the case. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about any of that stuff. It was just how are you? You looking good? How are you? You looking good kind of thing. And quiet as kept. Quincy, I had exchanged some messages with him, I think either before that or immediately after that or both. Because a lot of times when he's on Inside the NBA,
yes,
I'll shoot him a text in the middle of the live broadcast, and he'll respond. He'll respond to me. Like he was doing one show, and I noticed he had dropped a lot of weight from the Mounjaro medicine he was taking, and because he had talked about that. And so it wasn't a secret. And so I shot him a text. I said, hey, man, you're gonna need to tighten up those suits have those suits taken in. You lost so much weight. You're looking good. And he texted me right back immediately. Thanks, my brother. And all this was like right in the middle of the live broadcast on Inside the NBA. Yeah. So with respect to Charles, like I said, he and I share a friendship that I think transcended the case, and it transcended that whole thing. And I don't think Charles bought into either the media, the negative media, nor did I think he really bought into the federal prosecutor's narrative of what was going on in our case. Because I think, again, you have to take and weigh somebody you've known for 20 or 30 years against something that somebody you just met is telling you over the course of a few minutes. And you got to determine for yourself what is real and what is not real, what's fact and what's fiction, and I tell people this about me, and I think this is something that Charles understood. If I was a true con man, shyster, whatever you want to call it, I mean, I've been in business for myself for 30 years, man. I've owned multiple businesses. My businesses have been documented in some national magazines. I paid my taxes, I filed tax returns, all the things. If I was a con man or a shyster over the course of 30 years, don't you think I would have been found out by now? Don't you think it would have been discovered by now? Don't you think I would have faced some type of charges or trouble or anything by now? So it's like, so I think Charles kind of understood that. And again, I also don't think Charles necessarily bought into the government's narrative of our case. I think he was troubled with the allegations, and I think they probably went to him and said, hey, you invested with this guy. This guy didn't do what he said he was going to do with your money, and so therefore we want you to testify against him on our behalf, because we're going to try to prosecute him and get your money back. And I think that was what was told to Charles. And I think Charles is not the kind of guy to where he wants to be involved in something like that.
Okay.
Charles is way more laid back, way more low key. Charles has burned and lost more money gambling than he's done investing in anybody's business, including my dad's company. And so Charles is not really stressed out about that.
Right.
I think Charles is more interested in seeing fellow black men being uplifted than he is about seeing fellow black men being torn down. And I think, I do think Charles wanted answers. He wanted some clarity on my dad's business dealings, especially his business dealings with him. But I don't think he was interested in seeing my father, much less myself, go to federal prison for what I think was really more of a civil matter and should have been settled in a civil court.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad that you addressed those issues. And definitely, if Charles happens to watch this episode, don't want to speak for him, but there are a lot of things, just being fellow African-American men. I've never met Charles Barkley, have always been a big fan of his. And just by you saying that he beeline directly over to you, embraced you. One, with that, I know that I would only imagine how big that had to feel to you, to see that level of intentionality, that level of, I don't know, again, I don't want to speak for him, some level of understanding, love, forgiveness. Those are words that resonate with me, to not only, speak to you, but also embrace you. And because, again, I just going through what I've gone through personally, it is to be on trial and to be persecuted and indicted by the federal government. Wow. It's an incredible experience. I can't even begin to express the complete words to describe what all goes through that. And so, and again, to be, these were people, person that you've known. He is he represents Alabama. He's just a good-hearted person in a lot of regards, from what I can tell. Just as looking, at Charles from a distance, I just know how complicated that could have been. But for him to respond in that nature, that's huge. I think that may have been huge for you. I know that is huge, speaks volumes to me about him, and to anyone else watching. I just think that speaks to the heart of that individual. Period. So,
yeah.
So
not all of the victims, not all of the so-called victims in our case were were like that. So some of them wanted to see us burn in hell, and they thought we had just done the most terrible things and all this. They really bought into the government's narrative of what was happening in our case, instead of taking a step back and just kind of seeing things for what they really were. And, so, I mean, but I did, there were several people that because I reached out to all of the victims in my case.
Okay.
I reached out to them via text message. I may have even called the ones that I knew a little bit better. And I just told them basically in a nutshell, look, if there's any action that I took during this entire ordeal that caused you to feel like you were a victim of something, then I apologize. And I hope that you can forgive me for any involvement or any action you think I took in that regard. And some folks did not respond to that. I guess they put on their game face, and they had to keep it on that they were upset with us or whatever the case. And that's unfortunate, and I feel bad about that, because I think all of the investors and so-called victims in our case, I think they're all relatively decent people for the most part. But there were some victims that reached back, that responded to me. One guy in particular, who was a named victim in our case.
Okay.
I don't have I have a text message from him, and basically the gist of the text message was, Donald Jr., thanks for reaching out to me. He sent this like the day before my sentencing. He said, Donald Jr., thanks for reaching out to me. I just want to let you know how bad I feel about everything you and your family are going through. Please know I don't hold you accountable for any of this stuff, and I hope everything goes well with you, and I'll continue to pray for you as you continue to go through this ordeal. I mean, it was something along those lines. And so I think deep down inside, a lot of the folks involved in our case, we had about 28 witnesses, including the victims, that testified in our trial. Out of the 28 witnesses who testified in our trial, 28 of them basically testified to the fact that I didn't have anything to do with anything.
Gotcha.
And I think the jury took note of that when they went into their deliberations. And I think basically anybody who was paying attention to our trial, I'm not talking about just getting the media spin from the Birmingham News or from AL.com, but anybody who actually paid attention to our trial, people who were there, people who read the court transcripts, or people who were in our inner circle or in the inner circle of people who were associated with the trial, I think any of them would agree that the trial and my participation in the trial was not what the government made it out to be. The government had to, because of the very nature of how they try cases,
yes,
they had to conflate me and my dad as being one and the same. Otherwise, their conspiracy charge fails. It doesn't hold water. They don't conflate the two of us and make me just as bad or just as malicious or just as culpable as my dad. And so that was the government's spin the whole time. But I think the jury saw through that, and that's why they acquitted me of pretty much all of the wire fraud, all of the bank fraud charges, and all of the wire fraud charges except for one. And even the one they didn't acquit me on, the one they convicted me on, was the smallest one in terms of dollar amount. I think out of the $13 million verdict, they acquitted me on the $150,000 wire fraud charge. So
okay,
I think they were really trying to just figure out a way to either get me out of the case altogether, or at the worst, slap me on the wrist with some type of penalty. But they really want to levy the bulk of the verdict on my dad.
Oh, your dad, yeah.
And that's what they did.
Got you. Well, appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you. We're getting down into it. Man, there's so many directions I want to go with
It's fine. We have to do a part 2, man.
Yes. So, but I do want to get into one thing here. Your father. So, where is he now? How is he doing? And what is your, I don't know, overall assessment of him?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Great question. So my dad was sentenced to 60 months by the judge, 5 years. He did pretty much exactly 3 years incarcerated, actual prison time.
I heard they wanted to give him, they were shooting for 18 years.
That's correct. Yeah, they want
Yes.
the max.
Okay.
They want the upper end of the guidelines, which
Got
is
you.
about,
Okay.
and they wanted the upper end of the guidelines for me too, which would have been about 6 years.
Okay.
But the judge, thankfully, something softened her heart prior to the sentencing hearing, and she realized. I think the judge realized that while we've been convicted and found guilty of these crimes, I think she realized that we did not really have the criminal intent that I think most people have in these types of crimes. In other words, this isn't something where we were doing something bad. We knew we were doing something bad, and we tried to conceal it and hope we wouldn't get found out. It wasn't. I think the judge realized this wasn't the case. The judge realized that my dad was doing something in business, and instead of doing it a better way, he did it probably in the worst way that he could have done it, and it just fell the wrong way with the investors, and that's what caused the conflict. But I think the judge thinks that my dad really does think that he did not do anything wrong, and that he was well within his rights to do everything he did, spend the money the way he spent it, based on the documents that were signed. So I think that's what the judge realized, and that's why she sentenced the way she sentenced.
Okay.
And I think she just also was just a good-hearted person for a federal judge. She was a good-hearted person and realized that this particular incident was not something that two first-time offender black men should have lost their entire lives for.
Gotcha.
And I think that factored into her sentencing as well. So
Okay.
anyway, but my dad, he completed 3 years incarceration. He was released in early January of this year. And was it early January of this year or last year? He went in 2019, 20, 21, 22. He completed his incarceration in early January of this year.
Yes.
And he's been living in Sacramento, California since his release. Just living out there. He's still on supervised release.
Okay.
So he can basically move around and do whatever he needs to do. He just has to, for certain things like certain types of travel and things like that, he has to sort of give notice or maybe get permission from his supervisor, his federal supervisor.
Okay.
But he was sentenced to 5 years supervised release. So I think he's completed a little more than a year or almost a year of supervised release. And so he's chilling out in Sacramento, just kind of doing different things, doing some consulting. I think he's doing some writing, of course, as you referenced earlier in the show.
Yes.
And he's still just being himself. I talk to him pretty regularly. And as far as our relationship right now, I mean, it's sort of picked back up to where it was before in some respects, and then in other respects there are some boundaries there, some that have been drawn by me and then some that were drawn by other folks, as far as things that we do together or want to do together or can do together, so I mean there's no, he's going to always be my dad. I'm going to always love him. I don't harbor any ill will toward him because of what we've been through. I know a lot of people think I should, and a lot of people probably want me to, but
Okay.
because of the kind of guy I am, I can't do that. I mean, if I was a different kind of guy, I wouldn't have to harbor any ill will toward him. I could have just testified against him and cut my own deal and not even gone to prison, not even been convicted of anything, if I was a different kind of guy. But I just wasn't that kind of guy. He's family, he's my dad, and whatever flaws, whatever mistakes he's made in the past, whatever flaws are in his character, it's just not enough to cancel out all of the good things he's done, not just for me, but also for his community.
Okay. Gotcha.
And for his family. So, yeah, we're in a good space. I mean, there's still a lot of difficulties that he and I both face in terms of just trying to re-enter society,
Yes.
try to make a living for ourselves and things like that. And I think if he harbors any regret, it's probably because of that, especially with respect to me. My dad fully maintains that I was a collateral damage in a trial that was really about him.
Yes.
And I can't say, I'm inclined to agree with him, quite frankly. I mean, that's not to impugn how I feel about the victims, or that's not to take away any accountability I have toward the victims. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, and most people who are familiar, again, truly familiar with the case, understand that is the case, but so I think my dad feels bad about that, and I think he's working hard to try to do anything he can to try to right that on some level.
Gotcha.
With respect to me, and I appreciate him for that. But yeah, we're in a good space. We just had a family reunion back in July of this summer, and so I had the chance to see him for the first time in 4 years.
Okay.
In person.
Wow.
I had seen him on FaceTime, and we had talked on the phone, but that's my first time seeing him in 4 years, since the day I dropped him off at Talladega Prison back in August of 2019.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's good to see him and hug his neck, and and embrace with him. So, but no, man, we're in a good space, and I don't see us not being in a good space for the foreseeable future, man. My dad's 75, and a lot of people don't have their parents when they at age 75.
That's right.
I still consider myself extremely blessed that I have both my parents. They're in their mid 70s, and I hope to have them for much longer, despite all the things that we've been through.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, and bro, we got so much in common, man. So many things in common, and yeah, that's important. That's not the easiest thing to do always. But again, I'm a big believer in forgiveness, maybe not forgetness, but definitely forgiveness. And what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger, kind of thing. And this too shall pass, and it is passing. So you talked about rebuilding your life, kind of after this. What has that been like, and what are your thoughts about where you are currently, and how all this has affected all of that in any kind of way?
Man, as far as rebuilding my life, I can pretty much sum that up in one word. I'll say 2 words. My wife.
Okay.
Having a strong partner by my side in the form of my wife has been the greatest blessing, and has been the only way that I would have been able to make it, both before prison, through prison, and post prison.
Yes.
A lot of guys that have been through what we've been through aren't so fortunate to have a partner who is willing to ride or die with them through that whole process.
Yes.
And my wife has been that ride or die, and she is almost the singular reason that I've been able to have any kind of rebuilding progress. Obviously the man above has made all things possible for me.
Yes.
But he works through her as his vehicle. And she's been the one, and it has not been easy, man. It has not been easy on her. She's had her own bouts with anxiety, depression, PTSD, all these things because of everything we've been through.
Yes.
She feels like she's been, indicted, tried, convicted, sentenced, incarcerated. She feels like it's all happened directly to her. And in some respects, I guess it has, because it's happened to me. But she's stayed the course. She saw to it that my daughter made it through school and stayed on track, wise and just mentally. And she saw to it that I made it through prison. I made sure I had everything I needed while I was in prison, whether it was money on my books or coming to visit me, or seeing to it that my wife was literally helping other people fill out their visitation forms to come visit me. Because people this was so foreign. What I went through was so foreign to most of the people in our friendship circle. They just didn't know where to even start.
It is so amazing. Yes.
Yeah, they didn't know who to call, so they called my wife, and my wife would literally fill out people's forms for them, get them to sign them and send it in, and just do any and everything she could to try to see to it that I could have some glimpses of hope and some glimpses of happiness while serving time in prison. And again, that's a whole other story that we'll probably get into in a part 2 or part 3.
That's right.
But after prison, especially to get back to your original question, the rebuilding process, again, I would just find it very difficult to do without a partner there who is encouraging me and helping me as much as she can every step of the way, and doing that in many ways by putting her own stuff at risk. her own credit at risk, her own finances at risk, her own reputation at risk. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of people say, hey man, you should get divorced so that your husband's stuff doesn't burn you and whatever.
Right. Yes.
And I understand those reasons. And
yes.
my wife and I have had those conversations, but she stayed the course, and she has so far been committed to trying to figure this thing out as far as the recovery effort. She's been committed to trying to figure this thing out together as opposed to apart. And if we get to a point to where we can't figure it out together and we do have to, go separate ways to try to figure ourselves out, we'll have that conversation. But so far, she has been a staunch supporter and advocate for me. And she has been the primary reason that I've been able to, have and keep some business interests, have and keep some work coming in, some income coming in for the house. I don't even say for myself, but it's for the household.
Yes.
And just have a life after prison.
Yes, that's correct.
And so again, so that's in a nutshell how it's been and what it's been. And because of her, we've had some success. We've had there've been a lot of drawbacks though along the way, as you can probably imagine. A lot of roadblocks, a lot of hurdles to overcome.
Yes.
A lot of doors being slammed in both my face and her face just because of her association with me.
Yes.
But there's also been some silver lining. There's also been some light at the end of the tunnel in other areas. And so what we've learned is, Quincy, you probably have learned this as well. You have to move different when you get out of prison.
That's right.
You got to do things. Right. You got to learn how to sidestep certain landmines. You got to learn certain responses from people. You got to basically play chess when you get out of prison. You go into prison because you're playing checkers. You come out a chess master, right? Because you got to learn how to live. You got to learn how to live with this scarlet letter F. F stands for felony. That's correct. You got to learn how to live with the scarlet letter F on your forehead. That's right. It's not an easy task, but having a good partner like her, like I said, I've been blessed with that because a lot of cats don't have that. I know a lot of cats. I met a lot of guys who wives, significant others, baby mamas left them while they were locked down, and they couldn't hack it. And in most cases, it was due to the amount of time.
That's right.
They were on lockdown for. In some cases, it was just due to just them not being able to bear the burden of everything that comes with what we've been through, the shame, the embarrassment, the harassment, just all the things. A lot of partners, spouses can't bear that, man.
They can't bear that.
You're asking them to take on too much with that. And my wife has taken it on. And I think she's taken it on primarily for our child. We have one daughter who's 11. And I think she's
big shout out to Shay and Demi. Well, yes.
I think he's taking it on primarily for Demi because she wants Demi to still grow up. I think for her, it's important for Demi to still grow up in the household with both of us, and for me to be there, and for Demi to have that image of both of her parents still there together, still married and strong, and having each other's back. So I think that was an important image for Shay for Demi to have. And so it's my wife, man, Shay. One word.
Sir. That's it, man. And I'm so glad that you shared that. And, I can relate to so many, there's just so many things we can relate on, based upon this conversation, man. And the experience. It is a truly unique experience. Not many people, well, it just depends on your upbringing, I guess, and just your environment. But I know coming from our kind of environment, it is not something that you have a really set of rules to understand how it works and, how to reestablish, once getting it is a whole new set of, like I said, mode of operations that you have to adopt.
Quincy, I tell people this, man. I tell people, look, everybody in life goes through their own trials and tribulations.
Right.
It's going to be something. It's going to be maybe your parents pass away. Maybe your child passes away. Maybe somebody close to you gets cancer. Maybe somebody close to you dies in a car accident. Maybe you have a child in school who has a learning disability. Maybe like in your case, maybe you have a child who gets into their own trouble with the law.
That's correct.
Everybody goes through some kind of trial and tribulation, and and that truly tests their resolve. And this was our trial and tribulation. Shay and I, prior to this, we lived a pretty privileged lifestyle. I mean,
Gotcha.
one that was built up with hard work and and dedication and love and all that kind of stuff. And both of us coming from pretty good family backgrounds, and then we hit this roadblock. And I tell people, look, this ain't the trial and tribulation I would have chosen for myself.
Right.
But given what a lot of our friends and other family members and other people I know go through, I don't think I would trade what I've been through with a lot of other people.
That's right.
With what a lot of other people have been through. I don't think I would trade my problems for somebody else's problems.
That's
because
right.
A lot of people have problems or have experienced problems that I just don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to have
Nothing to do with that. That's
I think
right.
I'll take my chances with what I've been through because
Yes.
I feel like I have the resolve and I have the character to be able to push through and try to make the most out of my situation. But
That's right.
I've talked to several friends of mine, people I know, and some people you may know, who told me, "Man, look, had I gone through what you've been through, I probably would have killed myself."
Yeah, that's a
probably
real
would've
thing.
committed
Yes,
suicide.
that's a real thing. I mean, they're not, that's no cap, as the young
Yeah.
people, young people say. That's real.
And I would come back, I would retort, like say, "No, I would, it ain't that bad. I mean, yeah, it's difficult, but you figure it out. You'll get through it." And they come back and say, "No, you don't understand. I would have I could not have handled that."
Right.
And then I just kind of ease back from the conversation. I'm like, all right, if you say so.
I kind of get it. I mean, I get it.
I'm
Everybody
built
has.
differently, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, listen,
Mhm.
God, going back to the trials and tribulation thing, God finds a way to course correct you.
Yes, that's
He
right.
sees something that's off in your
Off.
past, something
That's
that's off
right.
about you, right?
That's right.
It may not be that you're a bad person, but you may be headed in some direction that, that's going to jam you up. And so
That's right.
he course corrects you.
That's correct.
So my course correction just happened to be my involvement in this thing with my dad.
Yes.
And it resulted in all the things that I've had to go through.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it was not the end of the world.
Yes.
That's the thing I had to start telling myself that from day one in prison. It
Yes.
was not the end of the world. This was a single chapter in an otherwise 50 chapter book of my life.
That's right.
That's right. And it may be the most painful chapter. It may even be the longest chapter, but it was a single chapter. It's not
That's
like
right.
I'm looking at life in prison. It's not like I'm looking at the death penalty. So I tell folks that all the time. I said, look, man, it could have been a lot worse. That judge could have given me 6 years instead of 20. She could have
That's
given
right.
my dad 18 years instead of 60 months. She could have thrown the book at us. The prosecution could have hit us with more charges. They love to load down charges on.
That's right. That's right.
Just to throw everything at you, but the kitchen sink to see what sticks. Donald Trump right now is facing 99 felony counts.
Oof. Yes.
Now, that is a lot of felony counts to completely get off scot-free on.
That's right. That's right.
You would think his chances of something hitting him in the face, offense-wise, something's going to hit him.
That's right.
And the thing about it is the government, in a case with 99 counts or in multiple cases with 99 counts, Trump has to win the game 99 times. The government only has to win the game one time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
All it takes is one count.
That's right.
And that's what it took with me. One count destroyed my life.
Yep. Changes
for my
everything.
dad, 10 counts.
Yeah.
Right?
Changes everything.
One count.
Yes.
Yeah, changes everything. So,
Yeah.
But I still wouldn't trade my problems in for a lot of other people's problems. I just now know how to adjust. You make adjustments, you pivot, and you just kind of continue to follow God's plan out of the tunnel.
Yeah, Donald, this is, again, glad to have, we're having this conversation. I think that you are an inspiration. I think this story has value. Again, given the institution that we both graduated from, we have a lot of prestigious alums from Morehouse College, Spike Lee, Sam Jackson, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The list of names go, Edwin Moses, list of names goes on and on and on. And so, but, I think this is a This is a conversation that we did not get while we were in college. We only saw, we were only shown what the silver linings of life. We were, and again, I'm not going to diss the institution for that. I do believe, but we don't see, kind of that there are, we're not told the narrative that even as a Morehouse man, that there will be certain potential trials, tribulations, struggles that you will face in life and have to endure. So to wrap things up here, if you were speaking to a young man currently at Morehouse College right now, or a young man and woman who is a college graduate seeking to understand or just give them some kind of valuable lessons about life, about entrepreneurship, what would you say to that person right now?
Right now, I would say to a young person who is just starting out for the most part, I would just say, look, live your life, have fun, try to be the best person you can be. There is no such thing as instant gratification. Plan to work hard in life. Plan to, whatever you think you want to acquire in life, make a list of all the things you want in life, and then plan to spend the next 10, 15, 20 years acquiring those things. Slowly, methodically, and legally, of course.
Yes.
And just try to have fun along the way. And then also realize that sometimes life is going to knock you down, but at the end of the day, it's not about what knocks you down. It's about how you get back up and how you push forward. And also pay it forward. You're going to be, your life is going to be filled with blessings along the way. And it never hurts to pay that good karma forward to somebody else. If you've been blessed, try to bring somebody else up, because not everybody, may have the same resources and the same opportunities that you may have. That's something my wife and I, Shay, have practiced and preached for a long time. We try to do any and everything we can. If we have friends who are in business, we support their businesses. We spread the word about their businesses. We try to help grow their businesses. If we have friends who need help with something, we try to be there for them, whether they're going through a divorce or having problems with their children or having problems with their parents or whatever the case. I mean, we try to pay our good blessings forward, because I feel like that's the only way to live. I mean,
Yes.
I sleep good at night knowing that my wife and I live that way. We're not just living for ourselves. We're not just living just for our child. We try to live to pay it forward to others.
That's right.
And sometimes paying it forward can be hard, because a lot of times it's not reciprocal. You got folks out there that, that may not, that you would think are good friends, or people that you would think will be there for you when times get hard, and they're not there for you. But you can't let that deter you from living your best life and living your most wholesome life. And then the last thing I would just say is, you can be the best person out there. You can be you can be the most skilled person out there. You can be the most intentional person out there. You can try to live your life completely the right way and still get knocked in the chest. I mean, Quincy, I don't know if you knew this, but I never drank. I never smoked. I never did drugs. I never gambled. I never did any of that, ever. High school, junior high, college, none of it. I was always the DD, the designated driver at Morehouse. I was always giving the fellas a ride around in my car. I've tried to be the best husband, best father.
Need that, right?
Yeah. I tried to be the best husband, best father, best employer, best business partner that I can be at all times, and still got knocked in the chest and fell down, had to get back up. So you can be the best person in the world and you still get knocked down, and you have to just get back up and keep it moving. And that's my advice to the young folks.
Yes. Brother, as always, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate your story. I appreciate your legacy. And for everyone in watching and listening, don't let your setbacks keep you from your success. And until next time, peace.